Salutations everyone, this is Razor bringing you guys another Overwatch video where today we're going to be talking about the main tank position and specifically Reinhardt. Now you won't see much Reinhardt gameplay in this video and that's kind of the point. I'm not very good at Reinhardt, he's my worst tank by far, he's really the only tank that I feel like I can't play very well. And part of that is due to the fact that Reinhardt can't do much by himself. When it comes to matchmaking, pug matches here in competitive, or quick play obviously, where there's even less tanks to be about, you need coordination to have things work, and that doesn't really bode well for Reinhardt when you don't get the coordination. Every other tank, the other main tanks, at least Winston and Wrecking Ball and Orisa, don't need as much help in order for them to do their jobs. I know some people might not consider Wrecking Ball to be a main tank, but he is the initiator of the fight. He creates the space in the same kind of ways that Winston does. He just doesn't have a shield. And we do need more tanks in the game, we need more healers in the game, and most importantly, we need more shield tanks in the game because the only ones that we have are Winston, Reinhardt, and Orisa. And Winston doesn't really factor into matchmaking very much because, for Winston to be utilized in a lot of cases, I love running him on defense, Anubis, and he doesn't require there to be like a Diva and a Genji to follow up on his initiations there. But when it comes to actually running and the dive composition, that's not something that really has ever happened in any matchmaking game that I've ever heard of, except for maybe top 500 with, a duo or a trio queuers that, know what they're doing and want to execute dive, and they do. But that doesn't really happen in matchmaking, so we're still only down to 2 main shield tanks within the game. And when Overwatch first came out, Reinhardt was the guy. He was the character that you needed on your team on every map, always, no matter what, because he was the shield guy, right? He is the de facto tank for Overwatch. When you think tank, you think something that looks like Reinhardt. Big guy, a lot of health, armor, and a huge shield that has a lot of hit points before it disappears, right? That's what you think of, especially within the Overwatch universe where, the people that would hold up the shields for the Omnic crisis were people that looked and acted just like Reinhardt. We had Baldric, his mentor, and big old hammer, big old shields, rocket jet thrusters to go and pin some bitches. And that's what everyone needed when the game first came out. Everyone needed a Reinhardt because he was really the only shield, he was the only game in town. Winston didn't have his bubble buffs, and there was no Orisa to be had in the game. And, Diva Defense Matrix, you could only use one time and then it was used up all at once, kind of a deal. So you had to have a Reinhardt, and back in the day there were people that were willing to do that because you had to, right? Nowadays, less people are within that mindset that you need to have a good composition in order to beat most teams, and a lot less people are willing to play main tank than beforehand. But Reinhardt is always a frustrating character to play because he relies so much on the rest of his teammates, right? He needs to have the other tank, whether it be like a Zarya to bubble him or a Diva to matrix him, or even a Roadhog to be there as moral support, right? Reinhardt needs help, and he needs healers pumping resources into him for his kit to be fully utilized. The most fun I've seen random people have on Overwatch is when they're like a duo or a trio queue, and one of them's playing Reinhardt, and the other's playing a tank, and the other's playing a main healer, and they're just enabling the Reinhardt to just go crazy. Some of those dominant players that I've ever seen within a single game of Overwatch has been a Reinhardt just taking it to us, right? He's getting all kinds of healing and damage mitigation from his other tank that he's just unkillable, and the dude does a ton of damage. He has to get in to do it, right? And not a lot people utilize Lucio and his speed boost as much as they should, but of course that's always been the case. And the same goes for Reinhardt and his ability to be the main shield tank for a team, right? And the problem with Reinhardt, what I call like the Reinhardt problem, is that Reinhardt either has to be the de facto we need this character in order to win, like he was when the game first came out, or a character like Orisa comes along, and it took her a while and quite a few buffs, but she comes along and does everything better than Reinhardt and is has much more utility and doesn't require as much teamwork and coordination and synergy in order to get value out of her kit, right? She has a permanent shield. When her shield gets destroyed, she just throws down another one. When Reinhardt's shield gets destroyed, that thing has to recharge all the way. It has a cooldown. When Reinhardt doesn't have a shield, he's a completely useless character, right? When he gets EMP'd, he could do, very, very little to help the team survive that kind of ultimate. And is susceptible to CC, whereas Orisa has Fortify. Granted, she doesn't always have Fortify, and it has to be like a reactionary thing or a precautionary thing. And sometimes, not being CC'd is a bad thing, like taking a bunch of damage from Whole Hog instead of being shot away, right? That's what makes that ultimate balanced. But when it comes to what you need your main tank to do, Reinhardt was the guy for such a long time. Throughout pretty much all levels until dive meta became a thing. But then afterwards, you had triple tank, and then obviously you had the tank heavy goats meta that has been a thing for a while now. And in last year's World Cup, everything was dictated on the Reinhardt play. It's why Team UK did so well, because of the synergy between their Brigitte and their Reinhardt infusions, and that kind of just carried every single fight, right? And so Reinhardt has been the most picked tank from bronze all the way to Overwatch League for the entirety of the game. No matter what meta that has been present, outside of dive meta in Overwatch League specifically, has Rein been the most picked main tank in the entire game. And that's because he was the only one doing his job, and then when he got some competition in the main tank, whether it be through added characters or buffs to existing characters, Reinhardt was still going to be utilized in triple tank formations and was kind of the linchpin of that. Afterwards, some people started running Winston goats, and obviously Sombra goats kind of, straying further and further from, what makes goats goats, but still with the same sort of ideas. But Reinhardt has historically been the best tank in Overwatch. People have their complaints about D.Va, and she, has had the most time as the most picked character. But when it comes to the main tank position, Reinhardt has been picked more than anybody, even at the highest levels of the game. And yet, still, even when he was the best tank in the game and the best character in the game, you still had people complaining that he wasn't good enough, right? People were saying he needed buffs. When Doomfist came into the game and he added more CC, and Brigitte came into the game and she added more CC, and obviously she got nerfed quite heavily, I think mainly due to last year's World Cup and those shield bash to shatter combos that were dictating how that tournament was getting run. And which is very inconsistent with the rest of Overwatch. Right now, Shield Bash is the only melee move that doesn't go through shields, where everything else does. Her mace, Rein's hammer, anyone else's melee button, Doomfist, Winston ult, everything goes through barriers when it's a melee, except for Shield Bash. So a little inconsistent there, but you can see why they wanted to make that change. And now, if 222 becomes a thing, you'll never see Brigitte like ever again, ever. But Reinhardt has kind of always had a place. Even when dive meta was a thing, you still would see Reinhardt on King's Row because of the way that game was very narrow. There was some verticality to it, and you can kind of understand why dive was so good because of the agility and positioning and maintaining of high ground and challenging high ground. Is just, you can see why that's super important, right? And you can see the skill gap of what you would need in order to play at the highest levels. You need to have great Winston play and Diva follow-up, and Genji and Tracer, you know, very high skill floor, very high skill ceiling kind of attributes, right? And you can see why like AGI builds and like, you know, things are meta in a lot of video games where the fastest characters are some of the best, but can only be utilized from the best players in the world, right? To really get a lot out of their kits, whether it be fighting games or you know, online games, PvE games, and you know, PvP games. You know, come to, you know, the like search and destroy and Call of Duty marathon lightweight. That's what you ran because you needed the speed. You know, when you only have one life, the ability to do other things just didn't matter as much when you can get a very good opening route. So in a lot of games, speed is very big. And then the game slowed down a ton with the GOATS meta, and Rein was a big part of that. And now that you have Bunker, which is a static composition where no one's moving at all, you're just keeping keeping your Bastion up with the perma Orisa barrier, and you have Baptiste with his frisbee of no death to protect everybody when the shield does briefly go down, but then Orisa's going to get another one and she can fortify so she doesn't get CC'd. But people are complaining about Reinhardt, right? Because of the Doomfist CCing him, and then the Brigitte, and maybe he gets flashbanged. But and some people, even some of the pros in the world, are saying CC should be deleted from the game, just no crowd control whatsoever. And I think all those opinions are wrong. Like, if you have CC gone from the game, or if Reinhardt just becomes immune to CC, then what's the point of CC when it can't do anything, when the best character in the game cannot be crowd controlled, right? And so I think like making him immune to CC, or, you know, somewhat immune to where like it doesn't have as much effect, I think is a mistake, because then those moves get zero value, and some of those are, you know, skill shots. And then you have a character like Orisa, who started to, you know, she got buffed to the size and shape of her shield. You know, she got buffs to the speed of her primary fire and to her ultimate, right? So she got a ton of buffs, and now she can, you know, reload while deploying the shield. She got a lot. And here you see me switching to Winston because there was really nothing left for my shields to defend, and the team called for a Winston, and, you know, he's really good for stalling and doing a ton of cleave damage against these huge tanks, whereas, you know, me hitting defense matrix or the Brigitte or Ryan shield wasn't doing much. Winston zaps right through that, right? So obviously, and his ultimate's great for stalling. So every tank, I feel, in matchmaking has a place except for Reinhardt, unless you can get really good synergy and communication from your Zarya player and your healers to enable you to do what you need to do. Then Reinhardt kind of becomes unstoppable. Obviously, that's not the case at the highest levels of play, because you have much more coordination and focus fire. But the problem with Rein is, if you buff Reinhardt, or if you nerf Orisa, then Reinhardt, once again, like when the game first came out, becomes the de facto tank, to where if you're not playing him, then you're not winning. But where it stands right now, Orisa can do everything Reinhardt can except better, because she can block more damage with her shield. She can't angle it and move it around and walk with it like Reinhardt can. And obviously we're going to get tanks in the future, and we need another shield tank. Having Wrecking Ball added to have another main tank was good, but especially when it comes to playing with other people online, they don't know how, even a year later, people don't know how to play with Wrecking Ball and utilize him. And even though Halt Hook, you know, pulled port combo is still so good, you never see anybody pull it off, because the hogs aren't used to actually having to play with people. They're used to just going off on their own and carrying with their DPS power, right? Not actually, you know, synergizing well with the tank. And Zarya is such an incorrectly played character on matchmaking, because of people aren't utilizing the bubble correctly and the positioning and enabling the Reinhardt to do what he needs to do. And she's not very good on defense because she relies on charge, and if you have not a lot of time left, she's not going to get her ultimate, whereas, you know, Diva's going to be better in those situations. So like every other tank has their spot, but either it's Rein is the best and you need him, or someone like Orisa comes along and completely, gives you no reason to play Rein. I have no reason to play Reinhardt right now in matchmaking. And if and when Goats goes away, there might not ever be a reason to play Reinhardt again, especially if Bunker becomes the new thing or if another tank comes along. Reinhardt has the ability to have a mobile shield that he can angle and has a great ultimate. Orisa has the worst out of the tanks for sure, but her utility with Halt, her ability to sustain with more shields than Rein as well as Fortify, keeps her in the fight much longer for less coordinated players or for less coordinated teams out there. And she has a projectile, right? Rein, he can do a ton of damage if he's out in there with bubbles and getting heals, right? Swinging that hammer away, getting, you know, an ult in 20 seconds. We've all seen it happen to our team or maybe even on our team once or twice. But that is a very rare situation at the highest levels. You don't see Reinhardt's carrying anymore, you know, in the Overwatch League, even though he is the most and or second most used tank in the game. Even with the shit ton of nerfs D.Va's been getting, if 222 becomes a thing, she'll still have that utilization with Winston or with any other dive tank that, you know, might come out there. But we need more shield tanks. Clearly, we need someone to do some of the things that Rein can do, fit in his same role. But when it comes to Orisa, she can kind of do everything better. The idea isn't to nerf Orisa, because if you nerf Orisa, then you just have Orisa when she first came out, where she was kind of useless and no one played her, and you can just play Reinhardt, right? But if you don't nerf Orisa, then Reinhardt's unstoppable. If you buff Reinhardt, Reinhardt's unstoppable. So it's a very odd predicament for Rein to be in. When he is on, and you can get, I don't know, like huge multi-kills that can just completely win the game outright. But when you don't, and Orisa wins the matchup versus Rein, so in the mirror, it's a fun back and forth, but when Rein goes up against Wrecking Ball, who's booping him everywhere, and Orisa, who can just shield way more than he can, as well as do damage to Rein and Fortify when he comes into charge, Rein either doesn't have a place or is the meta. And that's a very awkward position to be in right now. So it's specifically awkward for Reinhardt because he either has to be the best character and most important character in the game, or something comes along and makes him obsolete. And hopefully with DLC, with new tanks and healers that come out there, this will change where every tank kind of has a spot, or at least almost all of them. But Reinhardt has always been a subject of contention when it comes to changes and people complaining about his shatter and reworks and everything and nerfing Orisa. I don't think any of those are the right answer, because then Reinhardt is just the meta again. So it's a very delicate game and is gonna be kind of a problem, especially if you're a main tank player out there and competitive, that I hope Blizzard can find a way around, but honestly I can't think of one.